Just when you thought things could not get more difficult in the SEC, the Kentucky Wildcats have to go on the road and play the Vols without their starting point guard.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to be previewing Kentucky basketball's matchup with the Tennessee Volunteers. A recap of this game obviously coming later tonight. When I ask you guys up front, drop a final score prediction in the comments below for this one if you're watching on YouTube, if you're listening on podcast. Subscribe wherever you are tuned in. Hit me at Locked On UK if you got any thoughts about this game, because there's going to be a lot going on in this one. Cats taking on the Vols without their starting point guard, Lamont Butler. Andrew Carr, questionable for this game. What will the Cats do with a shorter rotation? I'm going to preview it here on today's show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if they win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. You can download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Again, thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there, we're free and available on all platforms. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you so much. Subscribe to the show if you're listening on podcast. Again, would love for you to subscribe there as well. Okay, let's go ahead and get into it. Typically, the way that we like to do these previews is we like to talk about the opponent first. We like to talk about what they do well, what they struggle with, and then we just dive into how they match up with Kentucky. Because of the news surrounding Lamont Butler, we're going to have to switch things up a bit because it's the most important thing to discuss. In case you did not see it, the SEC injury report came out late last night. Lamont Butler going to be out of this game. Not even questionable, not even probable. He is out of this contest. So what that means for Kentucky is they're now down their starting point guard and their backup point guard as they get deeper and deeper into SEC play. Ladies and gentlemen, it just simply does not get any easier for the Kentucky Wildcats, who are struggling a little bit as of right now. 3-3 in SEC play. That loss to Alabama was huge for the Cats and their tournament resume. We'll dive into what Kentucky's going to be, in my mind, in the tournament later on in the show, and kind of what they need to be on tomorrow's episode. Going to have that unpacked here for you on Wednesday. So Kentucky, again, without Lamont Butler, without Kerr Kriisa, what will the Cats do now that the rotation has been shortened a little bit? Well, I think the way that they go about things with this point guard spot is what they turned to in a victory against Gonzaga earlier this year. I think they need to go with Jaxson Robinson at point. Now, obviously, we can have conversations about whether or not Travis Perry should play minutes, about how much he's going to actually contribute in this game. I will say this off the top, and then I'll leave it here with Perry. He does not look capable of playing meaningful minutes, contributing effectively for Kentucky right now. He does not look like he is a worthwhile contribution to this team in terms of putting him out there at point or asking him to play any sort of significant minutes in an SEC contest. It just does not seem feasible to make Travis Perry go out there and try and perform in a spot that he's clearly not comfortable performing in. His defense has been extremely subpar. He was -8 in just limited time there in Kentucky basketball's most recent game against Vanderbilt. He has not been a good defender all season long when he has been out on the court, regardless of the opponent. He has not shot the ball as well as we would like him to, especially considering a lot of his threes have been wide open. He's not capable of running the offense right now. Jaxson Robinson can handle the ball. He understands Mark Pope's system better than anybody on this roster, frankly, because of how long he's been with Pope at this point. I think you need to let Jax run the point, and frankly, keep Perry off the court as much as possible if you can. And if you run down the rest of the rotation here, I think Otega Owe will be your 2. I think Jax can slide down to the 2. if Perry is in. I think Kobe Brea can slide up to the 2, but I would prefer to keep Brea at that 3 spot. So you've got Dawe, Robinson, and Brea as your options there at shooting guard. At small forward, I think you're limited to 2 specific options. I think you're limited to Kobe Brea and then Trent Noah, who I think does deserve minutes. Now, we can talk about his defense. We can talk about what he is individually. All I know is this. He's come in. He's provided a spark here in several important games. He grabbed a big rebound there against Vandy. Just fights hard and shoots the ball well. I'd like to see Trent get some minutes. Frankly, if we're pointing out different guys that could run point, I think Trent or Dawe could also run the point a little bit better than what Perry has done. I just do not trust Travis Perry currently. So you've got Brea starting, I think, at the 3. I think you've got Noah as his backup. Almanor is your starting 4, unfortunately, in this situation. You can slide Brea down to the 4. You can slide Garrison up to the 4 if you want to have a big lineup there, but that's going to be really dangerous, especially considering foul possibilities here, which we'll get to later on in the show. Amari's your starting 5. Garrison is your backup. All of this to say, Jaxson Robinson and Amari Williams, matchup-wise, have to step up here. Williams has about 30 pounds on Tennessee's heaviest defender. He is the same height as all of their centers. He has to go out there and perform. He has not been performing well as of late. Frankly, has not been performing up to standard this entire season outside of grabbing defensive rebounds. He has to be a better defender, and he has to be a more efficient inside scorer in this game. He's going to be a massive aspect of this contest. Jaxson Robinson, running the point, I think is going to have to step up here as well. Look, if you're going to get an efficient outing or if you're going to get a possible victory on the road here against the Vols, you're going to have to step up and make your outside shots. The same goes for Kobe Brea, who's in a little bit of a lull as well. I think Jax has a more impactful role here just because he's going to be the one handling a lot of different things on the offensive end with the ball in his hands more often than he normally does. So Jax and Amari have to step up here in a massive showdown against Tennessee. Lamont Butler out. Andrew Carr, questionable. I'm just going off of what we're looking at here and saying with his back and how Pope has talked about him recently, I don't think he's going to play. So that's why I have the rotation the way that it is here written down. If you have any thoughts as we continue along here, please leave them in the comments below. I'm going to get into Tennessee and what they are, how they play, and this is, quite frankly, an extremely difficult matchup. Before we dive into it, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, and endless possibilities for you. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting here than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that is just simply icing on the cake. Download the FanDuel app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Again, just bet $5 and you can win $200 in bonus bets if you win that bet. Again, that's FanDuel.com. You can bet with FanDuel, the official partner of Super Bowl 59. All right, continuing along here on the Monday edition of Locked On Kentucky. Really appreciate you guys checking out the show here today. Having this come out really late. I was waiting for the news surrounding the injury report. Also want to try and get these preview episodes coming out more closer to game time here. So again, appreciate you guys tuning in. If you've got any thoughts, comments about what's going on here between the Volunteers and the Wildcats, going to break this one down here for you. The Tennessee Volunteers playing pretty good basketball right now, 17-3. Despite a couple of different recent losses here, they are still very good on one end of the floor. This is the best defense in the country, at least right now. Tennessee is physical, very physical without fouling. They rank first in the nation in effective field goal percentage defensively, and they rank in free throw rate on the defensive side of the ball. It's actually first in the SEC. So not only do they do a great job of preventing you from hitting shots, they do a very, very good job of keeping you off the free throw line as well, which means a lot of teams have to kind of resort to some outside stuff because of their physicality. And they rank first in the nation in three-point defense. Opponents are hitting just 25.4% from beyond the arc, just 27.2% in SEC play. Tennessee themselves also plays a little bit of inside-out basketball. They prefer to get their points from the three-point line. And if you watched that Auburn game between these two teams, the Tigers and the Vols, this was borderline unwatchable with the way that both teams were shooting from beyond the arc. Tennessee shooting just 4 of 22. Auburn shooting just 3 of 20 with Miles Kelly hitting the go-ahead three-point shot that did eventually down Tennessee. 53-51 was the final score in Neville just a couple of days ago. So Tennessee coming off of a loss, a game that they played extremely physically in just a dogfight there down in Auburn. They just simply dominate on one end of the floor, at least on defense. But on offense, it's a little bit of a different story. So right now, Tennessee has the 34th best offense in the country, at least according to KenPom, 34th in adjusted efficiency, but they're 10th in the SEC in efficiency, and a lot of it has to do with the way that they're shooting the rock. They're shooting 43.9% from inside the arc, 43.5%, which is dead last in the SEC. So shooting 43.5% from two is just not going to cut it. And they haven't shot well, but at least they lead the SEC in assist rate. They work for their shots. They have the slowest tempo in the league. A lot of this has to do with their lead guard, Zakai Ziegler. They will run him on and off ball to try and get different things going. They run the pick and roll pretty well. They like to run lobs. They like to drive into the lane and be aggressive. But again, it's mostly inside-out stuff because they just haven't been shooting a high percentage from the rim. Zakai Ziegler is 10th nationally in assist rate. If you had Lamont Butler in this game, that would be absolutely huge, but he is going to cause a lot of problems for Kentucky defensively. The Vols, again, lead the nation in three-point defense, so if Tennessee's hitting their shots, they're going to be shutting you down on the other end. This will just simply come down to, can Kentucky kind of hit outside shots, and can they run Tennessee off the three-point line, something that Kentucky is actually pretty good at doing. Tennessee, the interesting thing about the Vols is they will actually let you take a lot of three-point shots, 26.3 per game to be specific, which is 333rd nationally. So teams are getting a lot of shots up from beyond the arc. They just aren't hitting a ton, which is, again, credit to Tennessee's smothering defense that they played. This was a statistic that I had for Tennessee before they played Auburn. This number has obviously gone down a little bit because they scored 51 in that loss to the Tigers. But Tennessee before that Auburn game was averaging 68.2 points per game versus teams inside the top 50 in adjusted defensive efficiency. Kentucky obviously there right at 80th nationally. This number was brought down a little bit by the 43-point performance they had versus Florida, a blowout earlier this year, but of course that Auburn game also brought that down a little bit as well. So Tennessee is pretty straightforward, I think, with the way that they like to play basketball. They're uber aggressive on defense. They do a phenomenal job of playing aggressively without fouling, and offensively they have been really struggling throughout the season to shoot the basketball despite wanting to try and take more threes, and they also have been really struggling here during SEC play. Of course, they faced a couple of pretty solid defenses here to start out. Florida, Georgia, Mississippi State, three teams that Kentucky has also faced off against that are incredibly physical. So obviously, Auburn as well, the most recent contest. So this is going to be a very, very, very tough test for the Cats against another team that is just simply battle-tested in terms of fighting through dogfight types of games. Obviously, as all of you guys know, Chaz Lanier is one of the X factors here for the Vols, averaging 18 points per game, shooting 42.3% from three, only shooting 41% from the floor. Hasn't had a ton of success inside the arc, but man, he is a very, very good three-point shooter. Obviously, you've got Zakai Ziegler, who again not only averages 7.5 assists per game, but also 2.1 steals per contest. only shooting 36% from the floor and 29% from three. But again, this is a very, very good point guard who can distribute and then attack you defensively. Jordan Gainey here, 11.1 points per game, a good driver, a decent outside shooter as well. Again, not a great finisher, but he can get past you, which is something that we've seen concerns with Butler, with Perry, with Dawe, with Jax. You've also got a guy in Igor Milicic, who is almost a 7-footer, who is averaging 10 and 8, averaging also almost a block per game, and he is not shooting particularly well from the floor, only 45%, but this is another guy here that can go and drive into the lane and either dunk on you or go and try at least to finish at the rim, maybe draw a foul or two. This is a very difficult Tennessee team to face off against because of the brand of basketball they like to play. As I have made it very, very clear, there are some teams in the SEC that I just frankly don't think play basketball. I think they play borderline football with the way that they like to play physically. Tennessee is another team that, while I do respect them as an opponent, they're very, very difficult to beat. The style of play is just, frankly, almost unwatchable at different times. The Auburn game was, I think, a really good example of that. The Florida game was almost another. Of course, Florida was able to get out and run a little bit against the Vols, but just the way that they like to play is just not, it's not very fun, and obviously it doesn't have to be fun. Winning basketball doesn't have to be fun to watch, but it's just still, it's just not the style of basketball that I would want to see out of my team. And when you look at some different games here across the slate, they are vulnerable. I mean, obviously, they can be susceptible to just playing flat-out bad offense, and they certainly did so against Florida. They certainly did so against Auburn. They had some lapses there against Vanderbilt as well. But it's just a question of whether or not Kentucky can hang in there by shooting above Tennessee's defensive average, from beyond the arc. And if we want to get into some more positives here, I mean, Kentucky has had several opportunities over the past few years where they've not been in the top 10, and they've gone on the road to Knoxville, and they've been able to pick up a few solid wins. Obviously, this is a little bit of a different situation. The fact that you're not just down your starter, you're down your backup, and you may be down your starting 4 as well. So it's going to be a really difficult time for the Cats, but also, if you want to turn that on its head, Tennessee plays a pretty short bench. They're 332nd in bench minutes. So maybe if you get the Vols into foul trouble here, things could kind of get interesting with the way that they have to adjust. So this is a tough game for Kentucky. I don't think they're going to win. I'm just going to go ahead and tell you flat out, I don't have a score prediction for you. You can leave yours in the comments below. Everything on paper suggests that Kentucky doesn't have a chance to win this game. Historical trends say that they do have a shot, but again, this is completely different in terms of personnel and in terms of what's actually happening and what's at stake here with a new head coach, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know where you find success other than just knocking down three-point shots, which again, on paper, Tennessee should shut you down there. So I think that Kentucky loses the game. It sets you up for a really must-win situation. It was already a must-win, but it's more of a must-win situation here against Arkansas. If you win against Tennessee, you roll into that one hot. Hopefully you were able to get Lamont Butler healthy. Maybe it's a few more days where Andrew Carr can get healthy. Who knows? But, man, you really, really need to find a win here within this week. Preferably, obviously, against Arkansas. But if you can get another quad 1 win here against the Vols, it would be absolutely massive. It's just going to be incredibly tough to do. All right, I actually have some positive news here for you about my market down prediction for the week, and this is actually just for the season. I'm going to tell you where I think Kentucky will land on the seed line in the NCAA tournament here in just a little bit. Before I do that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at Intuit TurboTax. Taxes used to be waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. It was incredibly stressful, but now taxes is just matching with TurboTax, matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, and everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. It's no waiting, No wondering and no worries. Now, this right here is taxes. You can get an expert now on TurboTax.com, only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app. You can see guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, continuing along here on the Monday/Tuesday episode of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. So we've got our weekly market down prediction for the week. If you see it on the YouTube channel here, the little stamp I like to put up here with our market down segment, we like to do this once a week, give you a hot take prediction for either the upcoming week, upcoming month. This is going to be for the season right here, and it's going to be my prediction, and I want you to go ahead and mark this one down here. Mark it down. Kentucky basketball will finish as a 4 seed or higher in the NCAA tournament, or at least they will be a 4 seed or higher when they get to the NCAA tournament. And frankly, I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that they kind of have to be, and I say have to be for a couple of different reasons. Number one, I think they kind of have to be a 4 seed or higher because of the strength of their resume at the end of the season. They already have 6 quad 1 wins. They're probably going to finish with somewhere between 8 to a dozen plus, especially with what's happening in the NCAA tournament, or excuse me, in the SEC tournament later on in March. So they kind of have to be a team that finishes with a strong enough resume to get there on that 4 seed or higher line. And then also they kind of have to be a really high seed. Because if you get down to that 5 seed line, you start to get a little worried about who you could potentially face. And I'm going to dive into that on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Kentucky, where we're going to do a deep dive, or at least on Wednesday's Locked On Kentucky, we're going to do a deep dive into Kentucky's tournament resume relative to some other teams on their same seed line and around them. And I'm going to give you my thoughts on where Kentucky specifically may finish and who their matchups are most likely to be, because I'll go ahead and tell you there are some very, very difficult teams to face if you get lower than that 4 seed line. So mark it down. Kentucky will be higher, a 4 seed or higher in the NCAA tournament. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think Kentucky will be higher than that? Do you think they'll be lower than that? Where do you think they'll finish? That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hey, you can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at @LanceDawe_, and you can follow the show on Instagram. That is over at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, you can leave those in the YouTube comments below. You can hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Kentucky. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless. I hate Tennessee.